I guess it's that time we have to give the annual reminder. If you are getting arrested, it's probably best to go along with it and not resist the arrest, because that's when bad things can happen to you. Good morning. It's a Wednesday. That's all I got. Show's over. We'll see you tomorrow on KCMO. I bring this up because one of the lead stories on the Kansas City Star website this morning is a video showing KCPD wrestling a black woman to the ground at the Power and Light District after the AFC Championship game on January 28th when the Chiefs beat the Ravens. And now it looks like this individual who got arrested is looking for her 15 minutes. If you haven't seen the video, well, I have a little bit of the video here to play for you, but you should probably see it for yourself on the Kansas City Star website. If you don't have that, if you can't see that, that's okay as well. We'll talk you through it here on KCMO Talk Radio. So a Kansas City woman says she suffered a concussion, memory loss, a swollen eye, and a bruised face when several off-duty Kansas City police officers wrestled her to the ground during an arrest at Power and Light District last week. Deshayon Renee Pons, 25 years old, was with a cousin and her girlfriend watching the January 28th AFC Championship game, and about 8 p.m. she had an argument with a bartender about her bill, and that's when police were summoned. There are cell phone videos recorded by a bystander that show several KCPD officers pulling Pons, as the Kansas City Star writes here, who is black, because, of course, that's the reason they care about the story, towards a security officer as she is handcuffed and screaming. In the video, an officer is seen grappling with Pons and forcing her head and face into the ground while she calls for help. A second officer places his knee on the back of Pons' leg to prevent her from moving. So here's a little bit of what that sounded like, just so you can get a feel of it.
Daddy, chill! 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 Daddy! Daddy! Yep!
Just turn her over.
Now, that line in particular is obviously getting some condemnation in some circles, where an officer is heard yelling at Pons, if you act like an animal, we're going to treat you like an animal. Is that intended to be racial in nature? Or is that just someone who is literally acting like an insane person? I mean, I've called my kids animals. Hey, you're acting like an animal. Stop acting like an animal. Sometimes we play animals. We'll play cheetahs. Run around the house on all fours. And after about 5 minutes, my knees start hurting. I mean, there's only race there if you want to see race there. Because any person, white, black, Asian, Latino, who is resisting arrest in the way this individual was and is in that video, can act like an animal. Now, to be clear, does that mean the police are always perfect and no cops ever had a bad arrest? No. Cops are human beings, and some of them suck. You know why? Because some of all of us suck. That's how life works. I'm not here to say every cop is perfect. No cop has ever done anything wrong, and we can't be skeptical of police officers. We should be skeptical of anybody with some element of power. But when you look at this video, what you will see is somebody who is so wildly resisting law enforcement that to sit there and to say, well, you know, the problem here is the police mistreated me. Watch this video for yourself, and you see somebody who literally is out of control in a very public place with hundreds, if not thousands, of other individuals right in that area. If nothing else, you have to keep the people around this person safe. So in an interview with the Kansas City Star, Pons said the treatment that she received was unfair. She said, I was no threat. I could not have hurt them, meaning the officers, in any way. And the whole time they were hitting on me and beating me. I was in handcuffs, so I could not have done anything extreme to them. They did things to me they didn't have to and definitely traumatized me. It's something I'll never forget. It's stuff that I stay up all night thinking about. Now, KCPD Captain Jake Bikina said the officers and security guards were called to the disturbance at Big Sky Bar at Power and Light. I think that's where they have the bull up there. Don't they have the bull up there at Big Sky? I think they do. So officers arrested Pons. Other people became involved, walked along with security and police while they escorted the woman to the security office. Jake Bikina said taking the arrested person to the security office was usual protocol. So this is the other kind of conspiracy that's kicking off. This woman was taken to a room where people can't see what's going on in that room inside the Power and Light District. So there were a bunch of people with their cameras out trying to videotape it, and they took her in to this private security room inside of Power and Light. And people were screaming about that as well when they said this.
Screaming too. Yep. Yo, why is she screaming? Like, let me come in and see. Yep.
So you have this person who is in this private room with multiple members of law enforcement, and this guy is standing outside the room. Let me in with my camera, damn it! I demand you let me in. Will you let me in there with my camera? No, sir, that's not how this works. Okay? Law enforcement have a job to do. You can record all you want, but you're not coming into a private room of law enforcement with your dopey little cell phone.
They probably have cameras on them.
Well, they all have body cameras, and I don't want to guarantee anything, but I'm sure there's a camera in that private room as well inside of Power and Light. So Jake Bikina goes on to say that this is usual protocol. He told the Kansas City Star the officer advises the person they are free to film, but that they have to back up. The officers are well within their right to advise a citizen to cease their actions if they are creating an interference. And that's part of what you had going on here. Remember, all the KCPD members now have body cameras on, right? That came in 2020, 2021. It was after all the craziness. So all that was already happening. Other details of the arrest, Bikina said, are not public at this time due to the ongoing investigation. But, of course, the Kansas City Star gets to its punchline here. The video is the latest of several bystander-recorded videos over the years showing violent arrests of black people by Kansas City police. Nobody should be mistreated during arrest. No one, because of their skin color. But at the same time, you do not have a right to resist arrest because of your skin color. Everybody should be treated equally by the law. But at the same time, the idea that you might have some privilege based on how you look, that is also wildly unfair and wildly inaccurate. But the Kansas City Star has an agenda here. One, it's to divide by race. And two, it's to, of course, go after KCPD. That's what they're in the business of. 913-408-7957. Stephen in Johnson County. Hello, Stephen. Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. How about you?
Man, I'm glad to see warm weather. I'll tell you, that cold weather was tearing me up.
Yeah, man.
But what I wanted to say was, when the symptoms always show up with you and never nobody else, you could be the problem and not the police. I cannot think of nobody that stays into the police like African Americans do. And it's never their fault. It's always the police's fault. And then secondly, I think that every policeman ought to be able to sue these people that put them in a bad light. If you're going to show a video, show the whole video. Don't show part of it. Show the whole thing, because you're putting them in a bad light to make it seem like they're just mistreating people. That's defamation of character. And I think that every policeman that out here should have the opportunity to take these people to court and be doing that and sue them, and that stuff will stop. Anything you want more of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, well, go ahead, wrap it up.
Anything you want more of, you reward. Anything you want less of, you penalize.
Mm-hmm. Here's where I think, and it's interesting points there, Stephen. Here's where I think this needs to go. It can't be with the individual who whipped out their cell phone and gave it to the Kansas City Star. It's got to be potentially with the media outlet. But I don't think that they can sue the media outlets here. I don't think they can sue the individual. I don't think they can sue the Kansas City Star. The best thing you can do if you're a cop is have that body camera footage. And you know what? Roll the tape. That's the best defense. If no one's breaking the law and no one's out of line, that's the best defense they've got is that body camera. And that's why it's so critically important. If you are someone who backs the blue, you should want all of them to have body cameras because then it's very simple. 99% of them that are good will be let off the hook when anyone tries to, convince you otherwise. And the 1% that are scumbags, well, guess what? They'll be taken care of too. 913-408-7957. Roger Marshall will join us early in 20 minutes, Kansas U.S. Senator, on where we're standing with these border negotiations on KCMO 95.7 FM. We got Kansas U.S. Senator Roger Marshall. He is less than 15 minutes away on KCMO. Happy Wednesday. It's great to be here with you as we inch closer towards Super Bowl 58 as well. Don't miss that. Coming up on Sunday. So yesterday, all in all, on the national level, kicked off the show with the top local story, but on the national level, tough day for the GOP across the board. First off, they tried to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, who has done squat, and that's probably an insult to squat, on the southern border. I mean, he has just completely allowed that thing to be wide open for human smuggling, trafficking of drugs. I mean, it's been a disaster, and we all know that. We've talked a lot about it, of course, as of late with this border bill that ended up going nowhere that we'll talk to Roger Marshall about in just over 10 minutes. But they try to impeach this guy. Should have been a layup, and instead you have House Republicans who end up looking like a horse's rear end. The vote was 214 to 216. 3 Republicans, Ken Buck of Colorado, Tom McClintock of California, and Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin. And I'm surprised by that. I've met Mike a couple of times, and I would not have predicted that vote. They joined the Democrats in voting against the resolution. Now, we know that Republicans have a very slim of a majority as you can possibly have in the House of Representatives. And this ties back to the stupidity of getting rid of Kevin McCarthy, who I'm not here to be a fanboy of. I'm not. But you get rid of these guys, you throw them out, you shrink your margins. Of course, he leaves. Santos is gone. And you're dealing with, what, a 1-2 seat majority. And then you can't even impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, which should be an absolute layup. This is not difficult stuff. So that fails yesterday. Then, when it comes to the presidential politics of the day, Donald Trump is not immune from prosecution for alleged crimes he committed during his presidency to reverse the 2020 election, this per a federal appeals court yesterday. Now, this is a pretty big blow to Trump's key defense that basically said, hey, as the president, when all this was going down, effectively saying he has executive immunity. Well, this federal appeals court yesterday said no. Now, not necessarily surprising, and yes, a political witch hunt, as Donald Trump would say, but still also predictable that a federal appeals court would come down with this. So now this saga and this drama of January 6th, which is just a goldmine for the media, is going to continue on. And if they have their way, they'll talk more about January 6th the next 9-10 months than they will the economy, the border, inflation, things people actually care about and that are impacting our everyday lives. Instead, they'll go down this road and they'll keep January 6th, 1-6, baby. They'll keep it alive and well. That's the goal. That's their purpose. So that was, unfortunately, some other bad news yesterday. And then there was this. This is bizarre and strange. Donnie Boy coming out and throwing his weight behind, Bud Light. Didn't see that coming on Truth Social yesterday. Trump writing on Truth Social, the Bud Light ad was a mistake of epic proportions, of course referring to the Dylan Mulvaney ad from almost 1 year ago. And for that, a very big price was paid. But Anheuser-Busch, writes Trump, is not a woke company. Anheuser-Busch is a great American brand that perhaps deserves a second chance. What do you think? Perhaps instead we should be going after those companies that are looking to destroy America. Now, why would Trump do an about-face on this? What's the goal? There's always a goal here. I mean, Anheuser-Busch isn't even an American company anymore. They're not sitting on the other side of the state in St. Louis. That's not what they are. Well, how about this? A lobbyist for Anheuser-Busch is hosting a fundraiser for Donald Trump next month. The lobbyist in question is named Jeff Miller. He's a close confidant of former Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, who built his Washington business during the Donald Trump years. The event is set to feature dozens of members of Congress and Republican leadership, as well as Donald Trump Jr. Money talks. Is that America first? It is the most effective boycott in the history of modern-day conservatism. And Trump just magically wants it to end. Did I see Bud Light, by the way, apologize for anything? Did you? Because I'm still waiting on any of that. Now, I know they've spent millions of dollars in ads, and they're going to have big Super Bowl ads coming up on Sunday, and they're going to try to make you forget about the stupidity of 1 year ago. But they never were like, yeah, we screwed that one up. Boy, we got that one wrong. Sorry to our audience for totally misreading what you guys are about and what you care about. But effectively, Trump puts up this Truth Social post saying, hey, Bud Light, let's welcome them back into the fold. Why? Because the guy who's one of the top Republican lobbyists is throwing him a $10,000 a person fundraiser. All I'm saying is this. We know what the choices are going to be come this fall. It's going to be Trump, Biden. One is significantly better than the other on policy. It's not even close. But just understand the purity of all these people should be questioned every single day. And we're going to do that, and I think it matters. 913-408-7957. Let's try Jim out east. He's on KCMO. Go ahead, my man.
Hey, Pete. It was Donald Trump Jr. who first came out for Anheuser-Busch after the Dula Mulvaney thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. He did do that a few months ago. I remember that well.
Right. So it started back then, the Trump campaign with Anheuser. So.
Yeah, well, and I don't know how much of that is tied to this relationship, but obviously, let's be honest, Trump Jr. is not, it's not the same as getting the real thing.
Well, he's pretty close in that campaign area. I mean,
yeah, but listen, I mean, most people, if you were to replace Trump with Trump Jr., they're not the same, right? I mean, one's got way more sway than the other.
Well, sure, but I mean, it's the beginning of the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
soften the blow.
Yeah, and then out came the big one here, of course, yesterday with the Don announcement. Thanks so much, Jim. Tick tock, tick tock. We wait now on the Kansas City Royals and where exactly they want to end up building their downtown stadium. We just got done with Roger Marshall. He is predicting a Chiefs 24-20 win over the San Francisco 49ers in Super Bowl 58. He's also predicting the border bill crashes and burns today in the Senate, and then the ultimate decision will be made by you, by us, in November. Now, the Chiefs, they are talking. Yesterday, Clark Hunt, of course, the owner of the team, commenting on what renovations will take place at Arrowhead Stadium if you in Jackson County vote to extend the 3/8 sales tax. Now, they're not going to build the new stadium. That's off the table. Right now, they're talking about renovations and upgrades to Arrowhead. So here's what Clark Hunt said yesterday as he was, of course, in Vegas making the media rounds. This from the Kansas City Star, quote, "Our primary goals will be creating additional fan amenities on all three levels. We'll also do some things in the parking lots that will make tailgating better, particularly if the Royals vacate Kauffman Stadium." So what does that mean? Some kind of an entertainment-type district where Kauffman Stadium used to be. And, we've seen that, and there are other stadiums who have something similar. You actually go to Philadelphia. They have this thing called Xfinity Live, where it's one. Now, I don't know if the Chiefs can build. I mean, they could build something like that, but in Philadelphia, you have the three ballparks. You have baseball, you have football, and you have basketball. And then you have this Xfinity Live place, which has, mechanical bull riding and bars and restaurants and all these different things. I don't think they can do that because they would only have, 8, 9 football games, a couple of playoff games, and then maybe a couple of concerts. It's only 15 nights a year, give or take.
Oh, I see. It's a hub for all the stadiums. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we only have the one there if the Royals leave.
They do the draft out of there one year? I remember seeing it on TV for some reason, but, suppose the Chiefs get something done. Potentially, it bumps up our rotation in the draft, maybe, if it's a really cool thing.
That would be great.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind. I mean, listen, if that's what they want to do with their portion of the money, so be it. If they feel there's value in that, I think that's fine. If it helps them get more concerts, that's cool too. But, clearly what Clark Hunt is looking at is some kind of entertainment district or something entertainment-wise with Kauffman Stadium being gone. And he says also, quote, there are a number of things we need to do to modernize a building that's 50 years old and make sure the infrastructure associated with it is good for another 25 plus years. So, some of that is not going to be noticeable by fans. I've heard from people who are on the Jackson County Sports Commission that, there's concrete underneath the stadium that, falls once in a while. And they have netting that catches the concrete falling off the stadium. So, there are definitely things that need to be done. Now, he said additional fan amenities on all three levels. I'm curious what that means. I think there's plenty of fan amenities. Now, I go to the game for the game, right? I'm not going because of some cool bar on the 100 level or the 300 level. I don't know about you, but I'm at a football game to watch a football game. If you want to improve the food options, I'm good with that, but I'm not sure what else you're looking at there. Now, Clark Hunt did go on to say that, of course, a dome facility is a no-go. They're not going to do that. He said here, quote, at the end of the day, we believe Arrowhead would be just as good, if not better, than any stadium we could create. And good for Clark saying that. Because, we know how much his father loved that place, and for him to keep that legacy going with the best stadium in North America is a great idea. He said, we thought a little bit about a dome facility, which would be much more expensive to build. But as a family and as an organization, we're a big believer in playing football outside. Woo! There you go. It's an outdoor sport. None of this hiding in the dome in Minneapolis. Let's go. Minus 28 degrees, playing the Dolphins in the playoffs. Playoffs? I love it. He said, we think it's something that gives us an advantage come December and January when we're approaching the playoffs and playoff games. He says there's something, this is Clark Hunt, about Arrowhead that would be irreplaceable no matter how good the design is. Don't you love that? I mean, a lot of people complain about, we got to go for the new and the glitzy. And here's Clark Hunt saying, we've got an incredible facility. We have a stadium that provides first-class home field advantage between the outdoor elements, especially come the playoffs, and, of course, the crowd noise. Why would you give that up for one of these stale, generic-looking new stadiums? I mean, they all look the same. Let's be honest. There's very little character to a lot of them. I mean, they'll tell you there's great character. The developers will tell you there's great character. But I think the old stadiums have way more character than a lot of these new stadiums you see being built. So I love this from Clark Hunt. His approach, his attitude, what he wants to do, his vision, I'm all on board. Now, they're going to have something more official in the weeks ahead, he said. But now we still just sit here and we wait on what the Kansas City Royals ultimately are going to do and where they're going to go. My goodness, what is going on in our area schools? Feel like you find a new story of this ilk every day, maybe not at this magnitude, but between, teachers sleeping with students and now this story from Monday that came down yesterday, a Kansas City teenager is in custody and accused of assaulting a police officer working as a school resource officer on Monday morning. This from our friends at KCTV5. Court documents show 3 officers responded to a fight between several girls at around 11:45 a.m. at Southeast High School. The documents show a girl became combative and kicked the officer several times. As officers tried to put her in handcuffs, her boyfriend tried to intervene. And he put one of the officers in a headlock. Witnesses said the suspect had the officer in the headlock for about 10 seconds before other officers were able to take the suspect into custody. The probable cause documents show the officer had vomited and had labored breathing. The injured officer was transported to the hospital. Court documents show the officer lost consciousness. So you have a police officer who effectively was strangled by a high school kid in a headlock. And not only did he, I'm sure he did this in the name of protecting his girl, right? But it's not like he was just, hey, I'm going to stop this officer from arresting my girlfriend or something like that at school. But he took it one step further, and he literally put the officer in the headlock to the point where the guy lost consciousness. Court documents show the officer suffered damage to his airway. It was swelling, and it cut off air supply. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Reverse that situation, and I'll bet they would have suggested that the officer put a chokehold on the student, but we're calling this a headlock. I'm like, well, if you got somebody around the head, you don't usually choke him unless somehow you've got him bent or, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You'd have to get him in some kind of a bind. So was it more of a chokehold since the guy had problem with breathing? Yeah. It's a throat issue for him. It's what they treated him for. Had to intubate the guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did. That's right. Mm-hmm. I see that here. They had to intubate him. Mm-hmm. I mean, first off, if the roles were reversed, this would be the lead story at the Kansas City Star, and probably CNN would be covering this morning. But, cop gets choked out, knocked unconscious by punk teen who's trying to protect his girlfriend who was getting arrested after a fight at school. That's a local news story, right? I'm telling you, the only reason local crime stories stay local crime stories is if they don't fit an agenda. That's it. What did we talk about? We started off the show with this last hour down at Power and Light. You had this woman who got arrested. There was an issue with her bill at Big Sky Bar down at Power and Light, night of the AFC Championship game. She's getting arrested by police. She's resisting arrest. She's a black woman. They're white cops. And now that's the lead story this morning at the Kansas City Star. Black lady, now she did end up getting, her eye was all jacked up, and, they did have to kind of hold her down, and they had to arrest her. And there were people videotaping the whole thing and all that stuff. So that is more likely to become a national news story because it fits a certain narrative than this story of a KCPD officer getting choked out to the point of losing consciousness by a punk teen at a school, John.
Yeah, the student they were trying to remove was resisting as well. They'd had him separated from the fight, and then suggested she was mule kicking, which sounds to me like the officer was behind her. He was trying to cuff her.
Yeah.
She's kicking him. And he finally takes her down. That's when boyfriend comes to the scene.
And he starts choking out the officer.
Yep.
It's amazing how the common theme here when arrests go bad isn't tied to one's race. It never is. It's 99% of the time tied to what? Those resisting arrest. People want to make it out to be like, because once again, it's about the narrative. It's not about the facts. That it's somehow tied to one's skin color as to why somebody might find themselves in a treacherous or tumultuous situation during an arrest by law enforcement. But every single time, what is it really tied to? People who are put under arrest by law enforcement and then end up resisting arrest. This is not as complicated as some want to make it out to be. But those who want to make it complicated or want to make it about something it's not have an agenda. So whether it's this story at Southeast High School or what happened at Power and Light, which is now just coming to light over the last 12 hours with this arrest gone, not even an arrest gone bad. KCPD is saying the arrest was by protocol, but the Star is trying to make a big deal out of it. And ask yourself why. 913-408-7957. We got the news coming up in 2 minutes, and then we can figure out how to make the world's most famous person a little more right of center. That's all coming up on KCMO Talk Radio. 95.7 FM. A lot of talk, right, about how Miss Swift is going to make her way from Tokyo to Vegas for the Super Bowl on Sunday. And I told you that this narrative would at some point come to the forefront, and here it is. It took a little longer than maybe I expected, but here it is on a Wednesday morning. We've got it for you on KCMO Talk Radio. Headline from CBS News. Taylor Swift will likely take her private plane from Tokyo to Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. But the jet comes with emissions and criticism. Yep, here we go, baby.
You know what Taylor's done? She's taken the shine off of the Chiefs' name. You know, I've not seen one article about the Chiefs having a racist name. In the last 2 weeks.
That's a good point there, Mark. You're right. You know, she's continuing to help us out here in Kansas City. For those of us that love the chop, those of us that love the Chiefs' name, and who appreciate what it stands for, we haven't had to deal with that nonsense for the last 2 weeks. So, great point. So, instead, they're going after Taylor. So, she's taking one for us here. She's taking one for the team, is I think your point there, Mark. Nice job.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So now the criticism is coming down on Taylor. Why? Because she's flying a private jet. Oh, my good. The emissions of that private. I'm telling you, we are going to pull Taylor. All these people are worried about, Taylor's Big Joe endorsement. I'm not. I think Taylor, listen, you get a little older, get a little wiser, start to wake up a little bit, start to become a billionaire and realize, gosh, the government's taking how much money from me? And they're doing what with this money? I think, she's wanting to settle down. Maybe Travis is her man. Maybe start a family. Listen, we're all dopes to some degree in our 20s, and then you start to grow up. And I think Taylor's waking up to some of this nonsense. So the CBS News story, Taylor Swift is set to have a quick turnaround between her concert in Tokyo and the Las Vegas Super Bowl. But with a private jet, she'll likely be able to get across the world in time for the game. The jet, however, comes with steep carbon dioxide emissions and criticism. In 2022, digital marketing team Yard published a report that exposed what it called the celebs with the worst private jet CO2 emissions. And Taylor Swift was at the top of the list. Between January and July of 2022, Swift's jet took 170 flights, totaling 23,000 minutes in the air. She wasn't touring that year, and the average flight time was just 80 minutes. Her shortest flight time was 36 minutes from Missouri to Nashville. The private jet's flight emissions equaled 8,200 tons, which is 1,200 times more than the average person's total annual emissions. I know it's a little early. You haven't had the coffee. Let me restate that.
There's an emission.
Taylor's private jet alone during 6 months of 2022 equaled 8,200 tons. That is 1,200 times more than the average person's annual emissions she did in 6 months on just her private jet. Other people on that list, by the way, Floyd Mayweather, Jay-Z, Alex Rodriguez, Blake Shelton, Steven Spielberg, and Kim Kardashian.
No John Kerry.
No, John didn't make the list that year. John might have been that might have been a time when John was spending a lot of time out in Martha's Vineyard. Mm-hmm. So he might have been taking a bit of a breather that year. So I bring this up to say Taylor's going to get criticized by some of these wackos for this. And to me, she should embrace it. I mean, she's going to be getting attacked by these uber crazy environmentalists. Oh, my goodness. The ocean's going to be in Dodge City, Kansas by 2035 if we don't stop flying airplanes. It's nuts. And I hope that, Taylor does receive that criticism. And instead of trying to appease the insane, she embraces it. She goes, I'm flying private. I'm taking my jet from Tokyo to Vegas. Then I'm going back to Tokyo. Then I'm going to put on shows and keep flying my private jet around the world. Guess what? Because I can, and good for her. If I was able to fly private, trust me, I would too. You know enough about my commercial airline issues over the Thanksgiving break. That was a mess. So I'm jealous, if nothing else. And I hope that she embraces this, doesn't apologize for it, doesn't say, oh, don't worry, I'm going to give some money to some green energy fund at some point here in 2024 with my $1 billion. Just, you know what? Ignore them, embrace it, and we got room for you over here, Taylor.
I like the embrace it idea. Back in the 90s, it was this chic notion that you could do a carbon neutral tour. And the bands would go around and they'd plant trees in the cities where they stop, right?
Are you serious?
Look, if every Swiftie planted a tree, bam, we'd take care of it like that.
Who was doing that back in the 90s?
Oh, yeah, I don't know that a particular band adopted it.
Probably
but it
Dave
was
Matthews Band.
I don't know. I know it was. I read it in the British Enemy and Melody Maker, so it was maybe Radiohead or Coldplay tried it. I don't know, but
you think Dave Matthews was doing it there, Mark?
Yeah.
See, if Dave was planting trees, he was too busy smoking them too.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know about that.
Yeah,
but either way, oh gosh, that is super lame. So the CBS article goes on to note here that several high-profile figures have faced scrutiny for their private jet usage. Both Bill Gates and Taylor Swift have defended their private jet usage by arguing they offset the emissions. Bill Gates claims he supports clean energy and other sustainability initiatives, according to the Associated Press. And in a statement to the AP, Taylor Swift's publicist said Taylor purchased more than double the carbon credits needed to offset all tour travel before her tour began last year. No further details were provided. I hope that they come out hard against Taylor here and that she just says, you know what, I can't appease these individuals. They've lost their minds. And then what I hope it does is I hope it kind of opens her eyes to the way of the world. And the fact that she is getting criticized, yes, there's a portion of lunatics on the right who think she's a Pentagon psyop. Yeah, that's true. But she's likely to get much more mainstream criticism from those on the left for things like her carbon emissions footprint. So between this, the fact that the New York Times, remember a few weeks ago, the New York Times had this big piece in the editorial pages about how Taylor Swift might secretly be gay because of lyrics in her songs. That was floated out there by the New York Times. And remember that? Yeah, I know you're sighing, but that was just few weeks ago. So that was out there. And don't forget, she's no fan of George Soros after a company backed by Soros bought her original library of music. So that's three things right there that gives me hope that Taylor is coming around and just having common sense. Not that she's going to maybe vote the same way I do or the same way, many of you do. I don't care about that. But just having common sense and realizing the amount of crazy that is out there across the board. 913-408-7957, 743 on a Wednesday morning. It's great to be here. So a high school broadcaster in our region was awarded $25 million after he was allegedly caught on a hot mic using a racial slur. Except the problem is it wasn't him. And a jury awarded him $25 million. We'll get to that story and the details behind it coming up on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. I always get a kick out of, any politician, frankly, any person in power who thinks you barely remember, 2 years ago. Very obvious things from as recently as 2 years ago. And just hope you're dumb enough or don't pay attention enough to understand, what was happening in the world a couple of years ago. Good morning, 8:05. It is great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio. What are you laughing for in there, John? I haven't said anything funny yet.
No, but to your point, you'll hear things like, well, the Chiefs, who haven't won a Super Bowl since 2023, some silly unit of measure like that.
Yeah. Oh, they love those. You're right. Well, that's a good, that kind of weaves into where I'm going here.
That's what I thought.
Because,
made me laugh.
Yeah, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, did her press conference yesterday and was asked by our pal Peter Doocy, White House press secretary or White House correspondent for Fox News, fellow Villanovan. He was a year ahead of me there. Great guy. And he asked Karine Jean-Pierre a very obvious question as this border issue continues to unfold, right? We've had 8.5 million people cross the border illegally over the last 3 years. Those are the estimations. It's completely unsustainable. This Senate bill is going to go down in flames today. We had Roger Marshall, Kansas U.S. Senator, on the show in the 6 o'clock hour, and he said there's no way this thing passes. We know that by now. It's not getting to 60 votes. And even if it did and it went to the House, it was dead on arrival. But it's done. It's not happening. So now the spin out of the White House is, well, see, Republicans in Congress don't want to solve the border. Despite the fact that anybody with common sense understands that the executive powers that the president has allows him to not solve it, but certainly get these numbers down significantly. It doesn't matter to me how you feel about Joe, whether you love him, whether you hate him, whether, you got your Biden sticker on the back of the car. You got to admit, and you've got to give it to me here, that he could re-implement some of Donald Trump's policies, most notably remain in Mexico, and you will significantly decrease the amount of people trying to come across the border. Why? Because what Remain in Mexico said was that you can come here and claim asylum when you get met by Border Patrol. However, you're going to wait for your asylum hearing in Mexico. You're not going to come into the U.S. We're not going to ship you to Chicago or New York or wherever you want to go on a bus or a plane. You're going to go back to Mexico. And suddenly, there was this aha moment where people said, well, I don't really want to be in Mexico. Okay, then your asylum claim must not be that legitimate. And it worked. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best you could do without Congress doing something about it. And Congress hasn't done anything about it in forever. We all know that. So Peter Doocy asked Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday a very important question as she blames Republicans in Congress for not passing any kind of legislation. Specifically, a Republican House that is not even going to take this thing up, even if it passes the Senate today, which it's not likely to. Peter Doocy, very obvious question. Who controlled the House, as recently as 2 years ago?
So you guys talk a lot, including today, about how the border wouldn't be such a big deal if Congress would have just passed your immigration bill on day one. Who was in charge of Congress on day one?
So it's been 3 years. It's been three whole years. More than 3 years. More than 1,000 days. And
boy, what a filibuster this is. Okay. More than 3 years. 3 years. More than 3 years. More than 1,000 days. I'm waiting for her to give the weeks. More than 156 weeks. More than 3,742 hours. More than 28,472 minutes.
Longer than the Vietnam War, Pete.
I mean, can we get one more filibuster reference in there? But Peter Doocy saying, hey, day one, Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, and Chuck Schumer was Senate Majority Leader. So you guys had all the control in D.C. to do whatever you wanted, theoretically, on immigration, and here we are 2 years later, and now you just point the finger at the other side.
look, this is a difficult issue, obviously. This is a difficult issue. And what we have said is that Congress has to act, right? Congress, Democrats, Republicans have to act. But in those 3 years, it is true that Republicans have gotten in the way. They just have, Peter. They have consistently used immigration, the immigration system, the broken system, as a political stunt. That's what they've done. They've gotten in the way in trying to get more Border Patrol agents. They've gotten in the way in actually trying to fix what's happening, the challenges at the border. They did.
That doesn't answer the obvious question Peter Doocy asked, which is, hey, you guys say if your bill on immigration was passed on day one, this is all solved. You had complete control of Washington, D.C. on day one in January of 2021. Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, Schumer was Majority Leader, and if there was ever a time to do it, I mean, really for any president, you have a 6 to 12-month window to really make stuff happen. And then, you know, it kind of all falls apart. You got to do things fast, right out of the gates. And instead, the only thing that was done on immigration was basically rolling back all of Donnie's policies. Because, well, he was a big, bad orange man. I mean, it wasn't based on anything else more than that. Because even if you didn't like Trump, you could look at the situation at the border and say, well, it's improved, certainly. This policy, this Remain in Mexico through executive order, is certainly helping. So why would you remove it? Unless you actually want what has transpired over the last 3 years to happen. That's the only way you would undo that look at what's taken place the last 3 years and then say, I can't do anything. I'm going to throw my hands up. There's nothing more I can do. Congress has to send me something. And it's not lost on me, and I hope it's not lost on you, that when you look back on this, the last 3 years, the same people, the same person, let's be honest, who says, I'm going to circumvent Congress on bailing out student loans. I'm going to circumvent the Supreme Court on bailing out student loans. Suddenly it's like, my hands are tied. Oh, man, this one, I really need Congress to do something, John.
Got a cramp after 41 executive orders.
Yeah, my hand's starting to hurt. I forgot my name. I don't know how to sign it anymore. Oh, man. Hey, whew, wow. No, I'm not going to fall for that. And neither should you. So when Kareen's pushing this narrative and trying to get this thing across the finish line and say, well, this is all Congress's fault. It's not. It's not. And even if you're someone who's sitting there as a die-in-the-wool Joe guy, you've got to admit it's not. And I know many of you are pointing out on the text line at 913-408-7957, Pete, Border Patrol is behind this. I know they are. I heard Brandon Judd. He's been on this show. He's the head of the Border Patrol Union. He was on the 5 a.m. show here on KCMO, the Fox News Rundown. And he did say he's a proponent to this, and his point is that it's a step in the right direction. But let's be honest, he's the head of the union. And yes, it gets more guys hired in Border Patrol. It gets raises to the guys in Border Patrol. He has to say that because there's billions of dollars attached to it for the union. I'm not saying and suggesting he's bought and paid for, but he has people and issues that he has to lobby on behalf of. I'm just sitting here as an everyday American and saying, why does it make any sense for us to have a cap of 5,000 people a day who can cross the border before we start implementing policies that actually stop people from crossing the border? That doesn't make any sense to me. It should be zero. And we should have an immigration policy that works, that is cleaned up, and that, allows people who want to come here the right way to come here. Because we all are, in the end, every single one of us is here courtesy of immigration. I am as a second-generation American. You are. We all are. So I'm not against any of that. But let's reward people for going about it the right way and actually know who's who. And that's not a big ask. That's not anti-immigrant narrative or anything along those lines. It's just common sense.